give my friends, my family a dance of joy.
On January 10th, 2025, a woman who once controlled one of Nairobi's most feared drug networks stood inside a courtroom at JKIA. Her name was Joyce Akinyi. For years, detectives had chased her, politicians knew her, drug traffickers feared her, and in Nairobi's underworld, she was known as the Godmother. As the judge prepared to deliver the sentence, Joyce sat quietly. There would be no dramatic escape this time, or powerful friends coming to save her and her Congolese boyfriend, Kalala. When she walked out of that courtroom, her fate was decided, and she would be nearly 70 years old before she tasted freedom again. For a woman who had spent decades surrounded by money, luxury cars, politicians, and powerful criminals, prison was the last place she expected to end up. But Joyce's story was never ordinary, because more than 20 years earlier, she had arrived with almost nothing. Then she met a Nigerian drug trafficker, and their relationship changed everything. The money and power came fast, and when the man was eventually deported from Kenya, Joyce didn't lose the empire. She inherited it. Soon, she was running drug operations of her own, dating a member of parliament, traveling across continents, and building a fortune worth more than 100 million shillings. For years, she seemed untouchable, but every empire has an ending, and Joyce Akinyi's would begin with betrayal, greed, and one decision that changed her life forever. Welcome to Dark Hour Docs. Long before she became the godmother of Nairobi, Joyce Akinyi was simply a young woman trying to survive. She came from Ugunja, a small town in western Kenya, where life had never been easy. When both her parents died, the responsibility of helping raise her younger siblings fell heavily on her shoulders, and Joyce needed money very fast. So in 1999, she left home and traveled to Nairobi, a journey of more than 400 kilometers, where she arrived with little more than hope. At first, life in the city was exactly what she feared. She knew nobody, she had no powerful connections, no university degree, and no guarantee that things would work out. Like thousands of young Kenyans arriving in Nairobi every year, she took whatever work she could find. The pay was low, the hours long, and no matter how hard she worked, the money never seemed enough. But Nairobi was changing her. Every day, she watched people make money faster than she ever could through honest work. Some drove expensive cars, and many seemed to have discovered shortcuts to success. Eventually, Joyce began listening, and the city began teaching her its own rules. Fast forward to 2002, someone very important walked into her life. His name was Anthony Chinedu, a young, confident, well-dressed man who always seemed to have money. Chinedu had recently arrived from Nigeria, and officially he was a businessman. Unofficially, though, he was something else entirely. And behind the expensive clothes and easy smile was a man connected to an international drug trafficking network. His job was simple. He recruited mules who moved narcotics across borders and collected the profits. At the time, Kenya was becoming an important transit point in the global drug trade, and Chinedu had come looking for opportunities. Both met one night while Chinedu was moving between Nairobi's entertainment spots. The attraction to Joyce was immediate, and what started as a casual encounter quickly became a serious relationship. Eventually, Chinedu revealed the secret behind his wealth, and instead of walking away, Joyce stayed and wanted in the drug business. But Chinedu hesitated at first, as the business was dangerous. People often got arrested, some disappeared, and others never came home. However, Joyce remained persistent, pushing him to eventually agree. The first trips were small and involved test runs, a chance to see whether she could handle the pressure. She was tasked with transporting packages to India and coming back without raising any eyebrows, which she did well. Then she completed another trip, and each successful run brought more trust and money than she had ever earned before. For the first time in her life, Joyce wasn't worrying about survival, as she was making serious money, and Chinedu noticed. Soon, he stopped treating her like a courier and started treating her like a partner. It was a decision that would make both of them rich, but it would also create the woman Nairobi would one day call the godmother. Once Joyce entered the business, things moved quickly. The drug runs were proof she could be trusted, and now she became part of the operation itself. Their relationship with Chinedu was now both personal and professional, and together they began expanding their activities across Nairobi. At the time, Chinedu's network relied heavily on drug mules, involving ordinary people recruited to transport narcotics across international borders in exchange for quick money. Finding reliable recruits was often difficult, but Joyce had the advantage of understanding the city well. She knew where desperate young people could be found and, more importantly, knew how to convince them. So Chinedu handed her the new responsibility of recruitment. One by one, Joyce began identifying potential couriers as recruits, and Chinedu focused on coordinating shipments and expanding his connections. More couriers entered the network, and more drugs moved across borders. Soon, Joyce was earning more than she had ever imagined possible, and the city that had once intimidated her was now rewarding her. By 2004, the relationship between Joyce and Chinedu had become serious enough for marriage, and in July that year, the couple officially tied the knot. For Chinedu, the marriage offered more than companionship. It strengthened his ties to Kenya and made it easier for him to establish himself in the country. For Joyce, it marked the beginning of a new life, one built on wealth that seemed to grow faster every year. The years that followed were extremely profitable, with Chinedu acquiring several properties across Nairobi between 2004 and 2006. He purchased a large home in Lavington, bought multiple high-end vehicles, and invested heavily in land. The couple also established Deep West Resort in Nairobi, a business that would later become closely associated with their growing fortune. To this point, their source of wealth remained hidden to outsiders, and as their fortune grew, the influence of Joyce inside the operation also grew. Due to her previous role recruiting couriers, many of the recruits now had dealt directly with her, and her reputation had begun spreading. And success created a problem neither of them expected. The more wealth they accumulated, the harder it became to decide who truly owned it. By 2007, the marriage that had helped build the empire was beginning to fall apart. What followed would trigger a bitter war involving millions of shillings, powerful politicians, and a deportation battle that would change both their lives forever. Despite Joyce and Chinedu having built a fortune worth hundreds of millions of shillings by 2007, all this was breaking apart due to the marriage collapsing. Years of working together had created wealth, but it had also created mistrust. Both wanted control of the empire they had built, and neither was willing to walk away empty-handed. At first, Chinedu hoped the separation would be straightforward. He believed most of the wealth belonged to him, since he had introduced Joyce to the drug business and built the original network. They had jointly acquired matrimonial property, a BMW 3 Series, a convertible Mercedes-Benz, a Toyota RAV4, a Toyota Harrier, and a gray Hammer H3. His proposal was simple. The assets would be divided, but he would keep the larger share. Joyce disagreed. She sold their house on September 2007 for 17 million shillings, received 4.4 million shillings in down payment, and the money helped her move the family out. The disagreement quickly turned into a full-scale battle, and before long, both sides were looking for allies. Around the same period, Joyce had become close to a prominent politician, Raphael Wanjala. At the time, he was a member of parliament and served as an assistant minister in the Ministry of Water and Irrigation. He was influential, well-connected, and increasingly involved in Joyce's life. For Chinedu, the relationship was a warning sign, but for Joyce, it was an opportunity. The battle concerning their divorce, property, and assets intensified. But while the fight over wealth continued, a second battle was quietly beginning, one involving immigration authorities. Suddenly, Chinedu's name appeared on the list of immigration minister then, Gideon Conchela, on foreign nationals suspected in involvement in narcotics trafficking and money laundering. The allegations threatened everything he had built in Kenya, and Chinedu was furious. He believed someone had pushed him in the direction of authorities, and the only one person who had a reason to do it was Joyce. Determined to remain in the country, he hired lawyers and moved to court, with the legal battle temporarily blocking efforts to be deported. But while Chinedu fought in court, Joyce's relationship with Wanjala was becoming more serious. The politician had become deeply involved in her life, and eventually, Joyce introduced him to the drug business. It was a dangerous proposal, but Wanjala possessed a diplomatic passport, a thing that was extremely valuable. Such documents often attracted less scrutiny during international travel and could provide advantages like immunity that ordinary travelers did not enjoy. This made him even more useful to Joyce, but for Wanjala, it was the beginning of a decision he would later regret. In October 2008, the couple traveled to India and flew through Uganda. The MP was not aware, as he thought it was a normal business trip, but authorities would soon become interested in what they were carrying and why they were there. Shortly after arriving, Indian authorities detained them and questioned the large amounts of undeclared money linked to the trip. Out of the 7.5 million shillings they were carrying, Joyce had only declared 375,000 shillings, and suspicions quickly grew. Before long, both Joyce and Wanjala found themselves inside one of India's largest prisons, Tihar Central, over passport authenticity, where they remained for over 6 months. Back in Kenya, the news caused shockwaves. But for Chinedu, the two people who were causing him the most problems were now locked up thousands of kilometers away, helping him regain freedom to manage the empire without interference. But this would not last long, as diplomatic efforts would aid their return home. Following her release from India, Joyce returned to Kenya determined to settle unfinished business. Her relationship with Chinedu had completely collapsed, and the battle for control of their wealth resumed almost immediately. By the time she returned, Chinedu had regained control of the Deep West Resort, but Joyce was not giving up. On Tuesday, March 31st, 2009, Joyce stormed the Deep West Resort in Nairobi to forcefully reclaim ownership and operational control of the club. Also, using her links, she tried to frustrate him by having him arrested on April, but he was later released. But by now, circumstances had begun shifting in Joyce's favor as authorities had associated Chinedu with narcotics trafficking, and they wanted him on a platter. As fate would have it, police raided Chinedu's residence in Kileleshwa in April 2013 and recovered equipment linked to drug manufacturing. Chinedu insisted he had been framed, but the discovery strengthened an already existing case against him. The deportation efforts that had stalled for years suddenly gained momentum, and on May 26, 2013, he was arrested. He was placed aboard a flight weeks later on June 3, 2013, and deported to Nigeria together with several other foreign nationals targeted in a government crackdown on drug trafficking. His criminal enterprises survived him because Joyce was still there. She inherited the entire drug network, and for the first time, Joyce was no longer operating under him, becoming the godmother. Deep West Resort became closely associated with her operations, and she became a major figure in Kenya's narcotics trade. But success brought attention. In November 2013, Joyce and Raphael were arrested while traveling through Kajiado County from Tanzania at Isinya. They were accused of transporting narcotics since a white powder was found in their vehicle, but the case failed to stick. Then, in March 2015, she was arrested again after police raided her residence and recovered narcotics. Yet once again, she managed to avoid a conviction due to her connections and influence that shielded her from consequences. For a time, she disappeared from the spotlight, but a year later, armed with claims that Deep West Club was bringing in 1.5 million shillings a month, she stepped back into business. What followed would prove to be a disastrous decision. On July 13, 2019, officers moved in at approximately 3 in the morning and raided Deep West Resort. Inside, they found Joyce together with her Congolese partner, Pine Kalala, and recovered approximately 5 kilograms of cocaine. And this time, there was evidence strong enough to put them away. A lengthy legal battle that stretched over several years followed, with the case eventually reaching its conclusion on January 10, 2025. Joyce Akinyi was sentenced to 25 years in prison for drug trafficking alongside her partner. This marked the end of her journey that had begun with poverty, passed through wealth and power, and ultimately ended behind bars. This has been Dark Hour Docs, and thank you for watching.